Hello there, Texas Deacon here. I've entitled this one, The Red Pill Number 1. What I have decided to do is that since I made the statement I took the red pill over 50 years ago, people had wanted me to talk about it and explain how I took it back then. Well, I decided to do it, but in my life, which I'll be 68 next month, there have been a number of things come up that made me know that things were happening that shouldn't be happening, things that shouldn't be going the way they were. And so I wanted to talk about more than just one of them. So the first one I've entitled The Red Pill Number 1. I'm going to give you something about my background. Like I say, I was born in 1943. I have some vague memories of World War II. Maybe it was because of the big empty house we lived in. Maybe it was because of all the anguish that our citizenry was going through at that time. And everybody had people in the military and they were dying all the time. So maybe that was part of my feelings. And plus, we lived near a railroad track and there were troop trains going through all the time, and I could go out on the porch and watch them. Anyway, so then in 1949, I started to school. I went to a county school, a wooden building. We did not have indoor plumbing. We heated with wood heaters. Both of that was gone in 4 or 5 years. I kind of think I was lucky to get in on the tail end of that era that I experienced it and can share it today. Now, in this little school, we did not have a library. We had bookshelves in the 8th grade classroom, which the principal also taught the 8th grade. Now, we had 2 classes where there was 2 grades, 2 rooms where there was 2 grades in one room, which was not an uncommon practice for a county school back in those days in the early 50s. Now then, in 1957, I made it to high school, went to the big city. They had a library that had periodical magazines in it, and I had never had access to periodical magazines in my life. I lived out in the sticks, out in the boonies. Magazines like Life, Look, Time, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report, and all those things. Oh, by the way, our school didn't have a telephone either. Of course, who did? There wasn't anybody to call. So when I got to high school, I started reading these magazines. And this was back during the big Russian scare that Russia's going to bomb us, back when you had the duck and cover, get under your desk, get in the nearest ditch, don't look at the flash. You had a lot of made-for-TV movies back then in the late 50s, which we did have a TV by that time. And it was just a Russian scare. But I was reading these periodical magazines, and they would have little articles in that about our airplanes, the airplanes that Russia had, and the bombers and this and that. And there was no way that a Russian bomber could have flown all the way down to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I'm using that for an example, without being shot down 14 times. They were propeller-driven airplanes, 400, 450 miles an hour tops. And they had to come across the Arctic Circle, the Arctic. But up there in Canada, we had 2 what they call DEW lines. DEW stood for Distant Early Warning Lines. They were radared completely across Canada, at least 2 lines of it. And we knew planes were coming hours before they could ever got to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And I would read about this and I'd point that out to people. And guess what? Just like today, when you talk to people, it's like talking to the wall over there. There's a few would listen, but most of them, it was just like talking to that wall. When you would show them, they would look at you funny. But I hung in. Now, back to the DFW. DFW had a Nike Ajax missile base, which was south of the DFW area. Now let's stop and think. The bomber is going to come in from the north, so you put the missile base to take it out south of DFW. As I calculated in my mind, even if a bomber got this far, and even if that Nike Ajax, which was fairly accurate, I guess, not real accurate, did knock the bomber down, the debris and the bombs were going to fall over the Dallas-Fort Worth area. No, it didn't make any sense at all. Later on, the government did admit that no, they did not have any bombers that could fly down here. Now, some people that have a little knowledge of history of aircraft and rockets will point out that in the 50s we had some rockets. Yes, we had some artillery rockets. In fact, back in World War II, Hitler had the V-1 and the V-2. Of course, the V-1 was just a flying airplane, kind of like a cruise missile. But the V-2 was one you couldn't stop. It was short range. The rockets that Russia had during the 50s were short range. Remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, when they wanted to put missiles in Cuba? The reason was that they could reach the United States from Cuba, but they could not reach the United States from Russia. Now, everybody just bought into this. And I saw that money spent on a defense system of those Nike ground-to-air missiles was just a waste of money. It was spent for nothing. Made the people feel a little better that we had our own missile base protecting Dallas, protecting us from nothing, protecting us from the hype that the government was feeding us at that time. I wonder what they were really covering up by keeping our minds on the Russian missiles or Russian bombers that were not going to come anyway. I became awake. I understood that was one of the major incidences, and I'm going to cover others, in which I saw money wasted. I saw taxpayers' money, not just government money. This is taxpayers' money. This is what people worked for. And it was just wasted for nothing. And I asked why back then, and I asked why today. Because for every one project we had back then, it seems like we have 100 today that serve no real function, wasting taxpayers' money. And we know where our economy is headed if I think God would have to personally intervene to save our economy. Think about it. May God bless America. May God bless the Republic of Texas. And may God bless you and yours.